If you're over 60 and drink coffee every morning, what I'm about to share could be the difference between maintaining your independence or facing a devastating fall that changes everything. I've seen too many patients in my office who could have avoided serious consequences if they'd known about this one simple addition to their daily coffee routine. The shocking part? Most people have no idea how this common morning habit, when done correctly, can protect their bones, their balance, and ultimately, their quality of life. I'm Dr. Helen Brooks, and I've been working as a geriatric medicine specialist for over 18 years. Throughout my career, I've treated thousands of patients over 60, and I've noticed a disturbing pattern that keeps repeating itself. So many health issues that seem inevitable with aging can actually be prevented or significantly improved with simple daily habits that most people overlook. Before we dive into this important information, if you haven't subscribed yet, I strongly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you never miss another health tip made especially for you. If you find this video helpful, please send your questions and video suggestions in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me create more content to help more people just like you. Now let me tell you about one of my patients who inspired me to make this video. Mr. Robert was a 72-year-old retired teacher who came to my office after experiencing what he called just a little stumble in his kitchen. But when I examined him and looked at his medical history, I discovered something that made my heart sink. He'd been drinking 3 to 4 cups of black coffee every single day for decades, never realizing that his beloved morning ritual was quietly contributing to a serious health problem. Robert loved his independence. He lived alone, took pride in maintaining his garden, and volunteered at the local library twice a week. He was the kind of patient who seemed to be doing everything right, staying active, eating reasonably well, keeping his mind sharp. But there was one crucial element missing from his routine, and it was affecting him in ways he never imagined. The stumble he mentioned? It wasn't just a one-time thing. When I asked more questions, Robert admitted he'd been feeling increasingly unsteady over the past year. His legs felt weaker. Sometimes he'd reach for something and feel a strange shakiness in his hands. He'd started avoiding his garden work because bending down made him feel dizzy. These weren't just signs of normal aging. These were red flags pointing to something specific that we could actually address. And the solution was surprisingly simple. Here's what most people don't understand about coffee and aging. Coffee itself isn't the enemy. In fact, moderate coffee consumption has been linked to various health benefits, including improved cognitive function and reduced risk of certain diseases. But here's the critical issue that affects millions of people over 60. Coffee can interfere with your body's ability to absorb certain essential nutrients, particularly calcium and vitamin D. And when you're over 60, your body is already facing natural challenges in maintaining bone density and muscle strength. Let me explain the mechanism in simple terms. When you drink coffee, the caffeine increases calcium excretion through your urine. At the same time, compounds in coffee called tannins can bind to calcium in your digestive system, making it harder for your body to absorb this crucial mineral. For a younger person with strong bones and optimal nutrient absorption, this might not cause immediate problems. But for someone over 60, especially if you're drinking multiple cups per day, this can accelerate bone loss and contribute to osteoporosis, increased fracture risk, and muscle weakness. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is what I wish Robert had known years earlier. There's a simple addition you can make to your coffee that helps counteract these effects while actually enhancing some of coffee's benefits. I'm talking about adding a quality source of calcium and vitamin D directly to your coffee. But not just any calcium supplement, and definitely not in the way you might think. Let me share another patient's story that perfectly illustrates why this matters so much. Mrs. Patricia was 68 years old, a former nurse who prided herself on staying informed about health. She came to my office complaining of persistent fatigue and muscle aches that had been getting worse over 6 months. Patricia was already taking calcium supplements, walking regularly, and eating what she thought was a balanced diet. So why was she feeling worse instead of better? When I reviewed her routine, the problem became crystal clear. Patricia was taking her calcium supplement first thing in the morning, then immediately drinking her coffee. She had no idea that the timing was completely undermining her efforts. The coffee was preventing her body from absorbing the calcium she was faithfully taking every single day. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. She was doing the right thing, but the execution was all wrong. What Patricia needed, and what I eventually recommended to Robert and countless other patients, was a specific strategy for combining coffee with the nutrients their bodies desperately needed. And this is where the simple addition comes in. By adding a tablespoon of full-fat milk or a calcium-fortified milk alternative directly to your coffee, along with ensuring you're getting adequate vitamin D through supplementation or fortified foods consumed at a different time, you can actually turn your morning coffee into a bone-protecting ritual instead of a calcium-depleting one. But here's what makes this even more powerful. The fat in whole milk actually helps your body absorb vitamin D more effectively. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means it needs fat to be properly absorbed and utilized by your body. So when you add full-fat milk to your coffee, you're not just adding calcium, you're creating an optimal environment for vitamin D absorption. This is something that skim milk or fat-free alternatives simply cannot provide as effectively. If you're still watching and finding this information valuable, comment number 1 below to show me you're following along. I want to make sure I'm creating content that truly helps you. Now, let me tell you what happened with Robert after we implemented this strategy. I didn't just tell him to add milk to his coffee. We created a comprehensive plan that addressed his specific needs. First, we tested his vitamin D levels and discovered, as I suspected, that he was severely deficient. This is incredibly common in people over 60, even those who spend time outdoors. As we age, our skin becomes less efficient at producing vitamin D from sunlight, and many older adults don't get enough from their diet alone. We started Robert on a vitamin D3 supplement taken with his lunch, which included some healthy fats to improve absorption. He began adding 2 tablespoons of whole milk to each cup of coffee, reducing his total coffee intake from 4 cups to 2 cups per day. We also added a calcium-rich snack in the afternoon, a few hours away from his coffee consumption, to ensure he was getting adequate calcium throughout the day without interference. The transformation was remarkable. Within 3 weeks, Robert noticed his energy improving. After 6 weeks, the shakiness in his hands had diminished significantly. By 3 months, he was back in his garden, confidently bending and reaching without that unsettling dizziness. His follow-up bone density scan 6 months later showed improvement, something that rarely happens in patients his age without intervention. But here's something even more important that I discovered through working with Robert and hundreds of other patients. It's not just about the coffee. It's about understanding how all our daily habits interact with each other and with our aging bodies. Coffee is just one piece of a larger puzzle. Let me share what I've learned about the other factors that make this coffee addition even more critical for people over 60. Your stomach acid production decreases as you age. This means you're naturally less able to break down and absorb nutrients from food, including calcium. Coffee can further reduce stomach acid production when consumed in large amounts. So if you're over 60 and drinking coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning, you're setting yourself up for poor nutrient absorption throughout the entire day. This is why I always recommend having something substantial with your morning coffee. Not just a piece of toast, but a meal that includes protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. The protein helps maintain muscle mass, which becomes increasingly important as we age. The healthy fats aid in vitamin absorption. The complex carbohydrates provide sustained energy without spiking your blood sugar. Another patient, Mr. James, taught me an important lesson about this. James was 75, a retired accountant who lived a very structured life. Every morning for 40 years, he'd wake up at 6, drink 2 cups of black coffee while reading the newspaper, then have breakfast an hour later. He thought he was doing fine until he fell while getting out of his car and fractured his hip. The fracture itself was bad enough, but what I discovered during his recovery was even more concerning. James's bones were so fragile that the orthopedic surgeon described them as crumbling during the repair procedure. His vitamin D level was dangerously low. His calcium absorption was poor, and his longtime habit of drinking coffee on an empty stomach had been contributing to this deterioration for decades. James had always been thin, which he attributed to good metabolism, but it was actually a sign that his body wasn't properly processing nutrients. After his hip healed, we completely restructured James's morning routine. He now has a protein-rich breakfast first thing, with eggs, whole grain toast, and a glass of calcium-fortified orange juice. 30 minutes later, he enjoys his coffee with 2 tablespoons of whole milk. He takes his vitamin D supplement with lunch. And here's the beautiful part. James is now 78, and his most recent bone density scan shows his bones are actually stronger than they were 3 years ago. He's regained the weight he needed. his energy is better, and he's back to living independently. What happened to James could happen to anyone who doesn't understand these crucial interactions. And it's not just about bones. The implications go much further than that. Let me explain something that surprises most of my patients. When your vitamin D levels are low, it doesn't just affect your bones. Vitamin D receptors exist in virtually every cell in your body. Low vitamin D is associated with increased risk of falls due to muscle weakness, higher rates of depression and cognitive decline, greater susceptibility to infections, increased inflammation throughout the body, and even higher risk of cardiovascular problems. So when you're drinking coffee in a way that depletes your calcium and interferes with vitamin D absorption, you're not just risking fractures. You're potentially affecting your mood, your immune system, your mental clarity, and your overall vitality. This is why this simple addition to your coffee can have such far-reaching effects. Now, I want to share the story of Mrs. Linda, because her experience illustrates another crucial aspect of this issue. Linda was 64, recently retired from a demanding career in social work. She came to me complaining of what she called brain fog. She couldn't concentrate the way she used to. She'd forget words mid-sentence. She felt anxious and irritable, which wasn't like her at all. Linda had already been to several doctors who'd tested her thyroid, checked for early dementia, and tried prescribing antidepressants. Nothing helped. When I took a detailed history, I learned that Linda had always been a big coffee drinker. During her working years, she'd drink coffee throughout the day to stay alert. Now in retirement, she'd cut back to 3 cups in the morning, always black, because she was watching her calories. When we tested Linda's vitamin D level, it was critically low. Her calcium intake was minimal because she avoided dairy due to lactose sensitivity. She was essentially running on empty, nutritionally speaking. Her brain fog wasn't a neurological problem or a mental health issue. It was a nutritional deficiency exacerbated by her coffee habits. We made several changes for Linda. She switched to lactose-free milk in her coffee. We started her on a high-dose vitamin D supplement temporarily to build up her levels, then maintained with a moderate daily dose. We added calcium-rich foods to her diet that she could tolerate. And we spread her coffee consumption throughout the morning rather than having it all at once. The change in Linda was dramatic. Within 2 weeks, she said it felt like a fog had lifted from her mind. After a month, her family commented that she seemed like her old self again. The anxiety disappeared. The irritability vanished. She could think clearly and remember things normally. All from addressing what seemed like a simple nutritional issue. But if you thought that was impressive, wait until you hear about the connection between coffee, calcium, and your muscles. This is something that almost nobody talks about, but it's absolutely crucial for maintaining independence as you age. Your muscles need calcium to contract properly. Every single movement you make, from getting out of bed to climbing stairs to reaching for something on a shelf, requires calcium for your muscles to work effectively. When your calcium levels are chronically low due to poor absorption, your muscles can't function at their best. They become weaker, more prone to cramping, and less responsive. I saw this play out dramatically with Mr. George, a 69-year-old former construction worker. George had always been strong and active. He took pride in his physical capabilities, but over the course of a year, he noticed increasing difficulty with tasks that used to be easy. Carrying groceries became exhausting. Opening jars required both hands and all his strength. Getting up from a low chair made his legs shake. George assumed this was just what getting older meant. He'd joke with his friends about losing his touch. But when he came to my office for an unrelated issue, I noticed the tremor in his hands when he reached for paperwork. I asked about his diet and lifestyle. Sure enough, George was drinking 5 to 6 cups of strong black coffee daily, had been for 30 years. He'd never taken a calcium supplement. He rarely ate dairy. When I tested George's vitamin D level, it was in the deficient range. His dietary calcium intake was well below the recommended amount for his age. I explained to him that his muscles were essentially starving for the nutrients they needed to function properly. The coffee wasn't helping because it was increasing calcium loss through his urine and reducing absorption from the small amounts he did consume. We implemented the same strategy I'd used with my other patients, but with some modifications for George's specific situation. He started adding lactose-free whole milk to his coffee. George also started taking a magnesium supplement in the evening because magnesium works closely with calcium for muscle function. We reduced his coffee intake to 3 cups per day, and we added strength training exercises twice a week to help rebuild the muscle mass he'd lost. The results were nothing short of amazing. After 2 months, George could open jars again without struggle. After 4 months, carrying groceries felt easy like it used to. By 6 months, he'd regained significant strength and was actually helping his son with home renovation projects. He told me in a follow-up appointment that he felt like he'd turned back the clock 10 years. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking about switching to decaffeinated coffee to avoid these issues. That's a reasonable thought, but it's not a complete solution. While decaf coffee does contain less caffeine and therefore causes less calcium loss through urine, it still contains tannins and other compounds that can interfere with calcium absorption. Decaf is certainly better than regular coffee if you're concerned about calcium loss, but the better approach is to optimize your coffee drinking habits regardless of whether you choose regular or decaf. Here's another crucial point that I want to emphasize. The type of milk or milk alternative you add to your coffee really matters. Not all options are created equal. Whole milk provides calcium, vitamin D when fortified, protein, and the healthy fats needed for vitamin D absorption. Skim milk provides calcium and protein, but lacks the fat needed for optimal vitamin D absorption. Plant-based milk alternatives vary widely. Some are well fortified with calcium and vitamin D, others are not. If you're going to use a plant-based alternative, look for one that's fortified with both calcium and vitamin D, provides at least 6 to 8 grams of protein per cup, and contains some healthy fats. Soy milk often meets these criteria better than almond or rice milk. Always read the nutrition label. Now let me talk about timing, because this is where many people go wrong even when they're doing everything else right. When you drink your coffee matters almost as much as what you add to it. If you take a calcium supplement, you should wait at least 1 hour, preferably 2, before or after drinking coffee. The same goes for eating calcium-rich foods. The compounds in coffee need time to clear your system before you can effectively absorb calcium. This is why I generally recommend having coffee between meals rather than with meals if possible. Have your breakfast with calcium-rich foods or your supplement. Wait an hour, then enjoy your coffee. Or have your coffee first thing if you must, but then wait before having your calcium-rich breakfast. This spacing gives your body the best chance to absorb the nutrients it needs. Mrs. Sarah learned this lesson the hard way. Sarah was 66, a retired librarian who was meticulous about taking her supplements. Every morning, she'd have her coffee, then immediately take her calcium and vitamin D supplements with a glass of water. She'd been doing this for 5 years, faithfully, never missing a day. Yet when we tested her bone density, it had decreased significantly. Sarah was devastated. She'd been so careful, so consistent. How could this happen? When I explained that the timing of her supplements relative to her coffee was preventing absorption, she was shocked. We adjusted her routine so she took her supplements with lunch instead of in the morning. We added milk to her morning coffee, and we made sure she was eating calcium-rich foods in the evening, well away from any coffee consumption. 6 months later, Sarah's follow-up tests showed improvement. She was finally absorbing the nutrients she'd been faithfully taking all along. Here's something else that's critically important. The quality of your sleep affects how well your body uses calcium and vitamin D, and coffee consumption, especially later in the day, can significantly impact your sleep quality. I've had many patients over 60 who drink coffee throughout the day without realizing how it's affecting their sleep and consequently their bone health and overall vitality. Poor sleep increases inflammation in the body. It interferes with the normal processes of bone remodeling and repair that happen primarily during deep sleep. It affects hormone levels that regulate calcium absorption and bone formation. If you're drinking coffee late in the day and experiencing poor sleep, you're undermining your health around the clock. If you're finding this information helpful, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might benefit. These are the kinds of practical tips that can genuinely change lives, but only if people know about them. Let me summarize the key points you need to remember. If you're over 60 and you drink coffee, add whole milk or a properly fortified milk alternative to every cup. At least 1 to 2 tablespoons per cup. Make sure you're getting adequate vitamin D through supplementation or fortified foods. The amount varies by individual, but many people over 60 need 1,000 to 2,000 international units daily. Take your vitamin D supplement with a meal that contains some healthy fat for better absorption. Space your calcium intake away from your coffee consumption by at least 1 to 2 hours. Reduce your total coffee intake to no more than 3 cups per day. Avoid coffee on an empty stomach. Have it with or after a meal. Cut off all caffeine at least 6 hours before bedtime, preferably 8 hours. Include calcium-rich foods throughout your day, not just in one sitting. Make sure you're getting adequate protein to maintain muscle mass. And here's the most important recommendation of all. Get your vitamin D level tested. Don't guess. Many people are deficient without knowing it, and you can't fix a problem you don't know exists. Ask your healthcare provider to check your vitamin D level and work with them to optimize it. Remember, these changes aren't about depriving yourself or making your life more difficult. They're about working with your body instead of against it. They're about understanding that as we age, we need to be more intentional about how we nourish ourselves. Your morning coffee can absolutely still be a cherished part of your routine. You just need to make sure it's supporting your health rather than undermining it. I've seen these simple changes transform countless lives. Patients who were weak become strong. Patients who were fearful become confident. Patients who thought decline was inevitable discover they can actually improve. And it all starts with understanding how something as simple as your daily coffee habit interacts with your body's nutritional needs. So here's what I want you to do. Starting tomorrow morning, add milk to your coffee. Check when you're taking your calcium supplements or eating calcium-rich foods, and make sure it's not right around your coffee time. Talk to your healthcare provider about checking your vitamin D level. These simple steps could be the difference between remaining independent and vibrant or struggling with weakness and fear of falling. Your body wants to be strong and healthy. You just need to give it the right tools. And sometimes those tools are as simple as adding milk to your coffee and paying attention to timing. If you found this video helpful, please leave a comment telling me about your experience with coffee and bone health. Have you noticed any changes in your strength or balance? Are you going to try these recommendations? I read every comment and I use your feedback to create more content that addresses your specific concerns and questions. Remember, this information is meant to educate and empower you, but it's not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Always work with your healthcare provider to develop a plan that's right for your individual situation, your medical history, and your specific needs. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself, take care of your bones, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll talk about other simple daily habits that can dramatically improve your health and vitality after 60. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss important health information that could change your life.